So sitting up nice and tall, close the eyes. And just take a moment to settle in, to arrive. And just notice that with each breath, your body is becoming more and more content in its place. Letting go of everything that happened before this moment and not concerning yourself with anything after. Just paying attention, witnessing your arrival in this moment. And drawing the hands together in front of the heart. Together we'll take one breath in for one beautiful Om. Take a breath. Bowing the head to the heart, acknowledging all that is. Drawing the face to center, flutter the eyes open. Did you notice what just happened? I lost my words. Yeah. My mind was disturbed. And my mind was disturbed, so my concentration was broken. I was trying to remember something while I was doing something else. And my mind got disturbed. And then I said two things at the same time instead of just the one that I intended to. So I don't know if you caught on to that, but it's very relevant to what we're going to talk about this morning. I recently watched a movie with Bradley Cooper. Not A Star Is Born. That was good too. But this one was actually really interesting. He was an author who was trying to write a book. And he had writer's block. And he also had a lot of other problems. lots of life situations, and he was, at the beginning of this movie, he was a bit downtrodden. Perhaps not the best personal hygiene. They portrayed him really well as this struggling individual, with lots of shadows in his closet. And then his ex-brother-in-law came to visit him and gave him a little pill. And he told him, the pill is legal. It's been FDA approved. It will help you out with your writer's block. So go ahead and take it. I'm trying to remember what the name of the movie is, which is why I got a disturbed mind before and started thinking of two things at the same time. Because I cannot think of the name of the movie. But that little pill...
Limitless?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Limitless. How many of you have seen it? Oh, you must. You must. So he takes the pill after saying no, then he takes it anyway. And what happens is, typically a human being uses very little of their brain capacity. They said in the movie 20%, but it isn't even that. I think it's somewhere around 7% or 6% of the brain we actually use. And this pill is supposed to open up the channels to use 100% of your brain capacity. So he took this pill, and within 30 seconds, his life changed. And he saw everything and understood everything and was part of everything. Just one problem. It only lasted for a little while. But in the day, it lasted for one day. In that day, he wrote half his book and did all these other things and just lived this huge entire, existence in a day that he had never experienced before within himself, and thought it was the pill. So he sought another pill. he went back and asked for more pills. Well, there's a whole plot to this story, which I'm not going to give away, because you really should watch it. But basically, he goes on to take these pills in order to continue having this experience of a complete mind, a complete power, a completeness. Part of me kind of wonders if that movie is based on Ram Dass in some way. Because Ram Dass, who was in the 1960s a professor at either Harvard or Brown University, and he was conducting LSD experimentation using university funding, which was not illegal, but was frowned upon greatly, because he and many of his hippie friends would sit there and be tripping in the lab, in order to find the doorway to this greater consciousness. He found it. But he himself said in one of his books that the drug opened the door, and then he had a moment where he realized that the drug would also close the door. And that if he wanted to maintain an open door, he needed to figure out how to replicate what the drug does naturally. And so he began meditating and meditating and meditating and utilizing the techniques of yoga. And he found that the door opened even wider as a result of the yoga, the greater yoga, the unity, the cessation of the fluctuations of the mind. I love when modern popular art embraces these ancient ideas, I would like to read you something. This is the first 16 sutras, called the Sweet 16. The sutras were written by Patanjali. Patanjali is oftentimes referred to as the father of yoga. He lived around 2,500 years ago, maybe 3,000 years ago, maybe 2,000 years ago, somewhere around there. And he was considered a scholarly individual, very, very intelligent, obviously using more than 6% of his brain. And he wrote this book called the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. And in there's 4 chapters. The first chapter is the Samadhipada, and it answers the question of what yoga is. Second chapter is Sadhanapada, and that talks about the practice, not the asana practice, but the yoga practice, the experience of yoga. The third chapter deals also with obstacles, as the second one does, and how to overcome those obstacles. And the last chapter deals with liberation. And those are loose. He talks about all 4 in all 4 chapters for the most part. But some people suggest that these first 16 sutras are the most important sutras in order for a person to understand yoga, to understand what yoga really is, at least according to Patanjali. Summarized, yoga is the experience of inner consciousness through the quieting of the distractions of the mind. When we experience that inner consciousness, which we can call peace, we are experiencing our true self. When we are experiencing the distractions of the mind and the peace is absent, we are suffering and we are believing the distractions. The distractions of the mind can be called thoughts, and those thoughts either bring about pain or they don't. There are 4 types of thoughts: correct knowledge, false knowledge, imagination, sleep, and memory. Make that 5. It was a typo. There are 5 types of thought: correct knowledge, false knowledge, imagination, sleep, and memory. The way to experience our inner consciousness and quiet the distractions of the mind is through practice and detachment. Practice is the steadfast effort to quiet the mind. That is what practice is. Practice must be continued over a long period of time, with little to no interruption and with great enthusiasm, in order for it to be effective. Detachment is the practice of letting go of our desires and attachments, especially the unhealthy ones. The most excellent experience of inner consciousness and the vast supreme consciousness happens when we are unaffected, unattached, and undistracted by the three qualities of nature, lethargy, passion, and balance, which are what cause those thoughts and those distractions. So I wrote that several years ago when I was studying with Reverend Jagannath, who was a devotee of Swami Satchidananda. And under his tutelage, he introduced this concept of the Sweet 16, which I'm certain he got from Swami Satchidananda. Things come down through the lineage. And what I learned from studying just those 16 sutras was that it comes down to choice. It's a choice to be distracted. It's a choice to be affected. It's a choice to be disturbed. You see, at the very beginning, when I was asking you to Om with me, when I invited you to Om with me, I had a choice. I could put that other thought out of my mind until a more appropriate time, or I could succumb to the lure of trying to remember. Obviously, I succumbed to the lure. But then I had another choice. Then my choice was I could judge myself and get caught up in that distraction. Oh, Sudha, why did you do that? That didn't look right. Now everybody thinks that you're distracted. You know? Or I could look at it and recognize with humility that practice must be consistent over a long period of time with little to no interruption. Otherwise, we become distracted. Our peace becomes affected, and we become disturbed. The other thing that was there for me to learn was that I then had another choice. And my choice was between judgment and compassion. And the judgment was another kind of judgment. It's the judgment between honesty and falseness. It's the judgment between seeing what is real and what is unreal, which is a judgment on some level, at least initially. So seeing what is real and holding compassion for self, for getting momentarily caught up, seeing what is unreal and accepting it as real, and then becoming even more caught up, more disturbed, more distracted. So Patanjali tells us very clearly in those Sweet 16, he says, the practice is the steadfast attention to stifling the distractions. That's the practice. And then we look at the practice and we say, well, that's hard. How many of you have perfected that so far in this life? Right? How many of us have actually really tried? Spent a good amount of time saying, okay, I'm going to watch these thoughts enter. I'm going to notice if they are lethargic, passionate, or balanced. I'm going to notice if they cause pain or not. I'm going to notice which ones keep coming back, which ones are habitual. I'm going to notice how I react and respond to them. And then I'm going to make a healthy choice. I'm going to make a spiritual choice. I'm going to make a choice, whatever you put in front of that. And then continue on to make the choice to not invest in the thought and instead to bring the mind someplace else. And the other place that we would bring the mind would be the place of peace, the place of contentment, the place of witnessing what is versus what is really not, the place of love, the place of unity. We can put many words to it. It's really semantics, you know. You either hate or you don't. And if you don't hate, then you are either neutral or you love. You can't hate and be neutral in the same moment. It's not possible. But you can love and be neutral. Isn't that amazing? Oh, it's another talk. But you can love and be neutral. Because the ultimate love is the practice, consistent over a long period of time with little to no interruption, of quieting the thoughts of the mind in favor of unconditionality, in favor of peace. And so when we love fully and wholly, we are neutral, because we see clearly that each person is struggling on their path. Each person is having momentary awakenings on their path. Each person is living their path. And who are we to inject hate into that? But we can inject love. We can say, I love you unconditionally. I have compassion for you unconditionally. I see you unconditionally. Because my mind is quiet now and not telling me to judge you otherwise. So that's probably one of the most practical and straightforward benefits of following this path of Patanjali's yoga, is that if we come to understand that the practice is not standing on your head. That is a great practice, by the way. It's one of my favorite things to do. But what you learn there about yourself and how that learning supports you in quieting the mind, that's the more important part of it. So we come into our yin practice this morning and we talked a lot about surrender. When we begin to practice surrender, what we're saying is, I'm going to allow myself to become unattached, undisturbed, and unaffected, in spite of whatever else is happening. But then there is this other component to it, because it's not just saying, hey, I'm going to be unaffected by you, I'm going to be undisturbed by you, I'm going to be undistracted by you. That can become a bit of a harshness, you know? That can become very ego very quickly, don't you think? Yeah. That's like when my daughter was a teenager, and she only did it a couple times, but she said, talk to the hand. She only did that a couple times. Because then I did it to her when she asked me for $20. So there has to be another component to this undisturbed, undistracted, unaffected. And that component is unity. That component is awareness. That component is being part of something that's even beyond description, beyond definition. Being part of that. Whatever name you put that to. God, Goddess, Buddha, Christ, Muhammad, Mary, Durga, Shiva, Krishna. The name is really not what's important. The essence is what's important. The name can very easily become another distraction. The name can very easily become another egoic endeavor. It's the essence of the name. And that's why in yoga we say, Shiva, the essence is stillness. Durga, the essence is clarity. Ganesha, the essence is resolving obstacles. Krishna, the essence is love. Mary Magdalene, the essence is surrender and love. Christ, the essence is sacrifice. The essence is what they brought to us. And then if our practice is consistent over a long period of time with little to no interruption, to the point that it becomes a supreme practice, then we can take sanctuary in any name, because we see them all as the same. And we exist more and more and more, but most likely not permanently, in a state of being unaffected, undisturbed, and undistracted. And what comes through more and more consistently is this all-abiding love. You know, the Krishna consciousness community is so amazingly beautiful, because that's where they go. They go to the bhakti. Bhakti means devotion. It means love. It's this sacred love. It's this all-encompassing love where what you are putting on your altar is not an apple, it's you. What you're putting on your altar is not just a flower, but it's your life. It's your intention. It's the essence of you. And what you're saying, and you don't need to be a Krishna consciousness practitioner to do this. It's anybody who has a devotee's heart. You say, the essence of myself longs to merge with the essence of that. So I will let every thought, every idea, every intention, everything be about that relationship. And in order to come deeply into that relationship, I recognize that I must quiet those thoughts in my mind that tell me otherwise. Some people say that there's a lot of spiritual bypassing happening in the world today. I tend to agree with that. I think there is. Spiritual bypassing is looking through rose-colored glasses. That's what spiritual bypassing is. It's seeing that, it's saying that there's only good, there is no bad, there is no harm, there is no challenge. It's just like everything is peachy. And that's not true. Because just look out into the world. Children are in cages, walls are being built, emergencies are being had, people are being separated, prejudice is at an all-time high, hate is everywhere. I mean, let's face it, we have our work cut out for us if we want to live to the intention that we have set for ourselves of living love. We need to see that, recognize it, and understand that more of it will not stop it. Like will increase like. And that the power of love, the power of peace, the power of yoga is that it is the opposite. And the opposite will bring more balance. The opposite will bring about something different. And that's what we're seeking. So to sit and to become caught up in the distractions of the mind, which causes us to call people names, which causes us to deny that there's even a problem, which causes us to become superior to others because we're more moral. Yeah, I don't think so. I think we're all struggling greatly. We are all struggling greatly. So the part of us that is called to the name-calling or the superiority complex, that's got to go. That's got to go. It's got to go in favor of a better choice. It's got to go in favor of a better choice, of a less harmful choice, of a more unifying choice, of a choice that has more truth to it and less falseness. So this spiritual bypassing that's happening out there in the world, I don't know, maybe it's happening here too to some degree, but that bypassing or that looking at things as if they were only golden is not to dissuade the thoughts of mind. It's actually to become more caught up in them in a way that is false knowledge. So remember we said 5 types of thoughts. Correct knowledge. So correct knowledge in the perspective of yoga would be that which unifies you with all things and does not cause separation, right? So that could be a definition of correct knowledge. correct knowledge can also be that which is in the scriptures that you follow when interpreted properly. And when it's interpreted properly, guess where it brings you? To unity, yeah, to love, to joy. False knowledge. False knowledge is what causes you suffering. False knowledge is what causes us to become caught up in those fluctuations of the mind. So false knowledge is a fluctuation, and its outcome is that it causes you to become even more entwined with the fluctuations of the mind. Imagination, I don't think there are really unicorns alive right now in the world, particularly ones that burp, sparkles, fart rainbow ice cream. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's all imagination, It's imagination. I'm not saying unicorns never existed, but those particular ones don't. Okay. The dream state, which some people suggest is very close to peace, to awakening, in the deep, 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 deep sleep state. They say that that's kind of close because the mind is empty. I've heard them say the mind is more empty there, but you don't know it because you're asleep, so it doesn't really count. It's only when you're in an awakened state, walking through the world, and you experience that vastness that you're actually, But then I've also heard other people say that this dream state or this deep sleep state is full of dreams, even though we're not aware of them, and so we are still in a distracted state of mind. And someone, I don't remember who it was, said, otherwise when you woke up in the morning and the first thing you said was, wow, that was such a good night's sleep. How would you know if you weren't aware that you were sleeping, which is a distraction of the mind? That thought, I'm sleeping and this is a good sleep. Make sense? Sort of? And the last one is memory. And memory is a tricky one because memory is looking back upon something, and you all know we have 20/20 hindsight, right? Yeah. Like, I remember when I was a child, I had a pet spider. He lived out in one of the flower bushes that my grandmother had by her house. And I remember that spider as being bigger than my fist. Like, big spider, big spindly legs. He was so cool, He was probably like this big. But I'll never know for sure because my memory is flawed. Yeah. When I think back about that spider being like, huge and kind of creepy and big spindly legs, it makes me happy, which is a deluded state because I'm happy about something that actually wasn't. When I think back about that spider being, probably like maybe the size of my pinky nail, I'm a little disappointed. And that's also a deluded state. Because I don't know what the spider was. I just know it was there. So memory is not always helpful. The time when memory can be helpful to us is when we remember somewhat accurately, and it brings us to a place of making better decisions in our life. Making good, healthy decisions, avoiding harmful substances, that type of thing, harmful words, harmful repeated behaviors. Then the memory can be supportive of us. But it's just such a slippery slope that it cannot be depended upon. So if you read into Patanjali's sutras that of these 5 types of fluctuations of the mind, right knowledge is the one that is most dependable. So where do we get the right knowledge from? Scriptures, studying with teachers who are knowledgeable. And I suppose, according to some, there's an intuition also. There's an intuition, but we don't tend to follow it. The heart says one thing, and the mind in a state of fear says something else. The heart says, be compassionate, but don't be a doormat. Be compassionate, but hold healthy boundaries. Be compassionate, but don't be a yes person just to have people like you. You need to be compassionate, but have clarity. That's what the heart tells us. It really does. It wants these healthy boundaries. It wants this healthy relationship. But then the mind kicks in, the distractions of the mind say, but then what if they don't like me? What if they think I'm a bitch? What if they think I'm being too assertive? What if they think I'm mean? What if they talk about me? And the ego gets involved in that. And then the ego takes that intuition and flips it on its head so that your behavior, your choice that you made becomes something other than clear. It becomes modeled. It becomes some combination of this, watered down intuition and this bolstered up ego. So Patanjali says that the practice must be straightforward, consistent over a long period of time, little to no interruption. You just got to keep practicing until the intuition becomes strong and strong enough that it subdues the ego. That the intuition to love, the intuition to unity, the intuition to surrender, the intuition to humility, the intuition to truth, that's the true intuition, the intuition to truth becomes stronger than the ego. Yeah. So that was a lot for a Sunday morning. Any questions so far? How many of you are going to watch Limitless? Yeah, it really is so stirring. Yes.
There's another movie that kind of the plot is about someone using their whole brain power called Lucy.
Yes, that's a good one too. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I just like Limitless because it was a pill. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And he thought the pill gave him that, And it didn't. All the pill did was open the door so he could see what was already there, what he had inside of him all along. And then, just like Ram Dass said in his wonderful book, Meditation, you got to find a way to do that naturally. You got to find it in yourself. Don't rely on the pill. Don't rely on the LSD. Don't rely on the alcohol. Don't rely on the sex. Don't rely on the clothes. Don't rely on whatever the addiction is. You got to find it in you to bring that euphoria naturally. And the euphoria is spiritual awakening. That's the euphoria. To be awakened in the world, as the Dalai Lama says. To be awakened in the world is bliss. But bliss is not a state of denial. Bliss is a state of clarity. It is to see that there is suffering, and that suffering is often great. And to address the suffering, but to also always still understand that there is a reason for joy too. That joy is present, even when suffering is present. When I was in India, Swamiji brought us to, I think it was a dance recital. There's young people, there were several of them. They all had some type of physical limitation, amputees or, birth defects or whatever. But they had all types of things happening. And they, for I guess a year or two, they had been training in dance. And to initially look at some of these children, you would say, how is that going to happen? Maybe they didn't have legs. Or maybe one leg was incredibly smaller than the other one. Or maybe they were blind. Or, any number of what we would look at and consider abnormalities. And when Swamiji walked in, he saw, of course, how could you not see? He saw their suffering. He saw what they are dealing with in this life. But you know what he did? He smiled. And he went up to them and talked to them. And he was jubilant and joyful. in talking to them. And they all came around and they started laughing with him and talking with him and telling him how their day was. And he would be really straightforward, and he would look at one and say, so where is the suffering here? Where is the suffering here? Why are you so happy? Don't you think you should be suffering? And they would say, oh, Swamiji, and they would get even more giggly because he would be calling them on their joy. And they were really open to it. They were open to talking about what they were dealing with as children. Children are so honest, But they were also super open to still being joyful anyway. And I think sometimes as adults we lose that. Sometimes as adults, what we perceive of as our limitations greatly overwrite our joy. Dr. Jeffrey, who's with us today, teaches nonviolent communication. That is a wonderful step in the direction of reclaiming your joy. It's not to say that by choosing to speak nonviolently, like I have heard some people say, is to avoid your emotions. That's not it. To choose to speak nonviolently is to knowingly explore your emotions in a way that is not violent, so that you can come to understand more effectively how you can not harm yourself or others on purpose with complete awareness. Isn't that great? We can hurt others with complete awareness. We do it every day. So why are we so hesitant to not harm others with complete awareness? Do you know what I'm saying? Right? Does that make sense? Yeah. Why can't we embrace that joy in our own heart and in the hearts of all others? Just imagine, you all have somebody in your life who's your foe, right? Like that person that you don't want to see. Imagine that you see them walking down the street and you just smile and say, have a peaceful day. Be well. Find your joy. Rather than SOB, Two totally different outcomes there. In Buddhism, there's a beautiful practice. It says if there's somebody in your life that you're angry with, if you can do this actually, it's the most powerful. But if you can't do this actually, then you can do it visually in your mind, visualizing. You take one white flower, no thorns if it's a rose, and you approach that person silently and place that flower at their feet every day in silence with no expectation. Something will change. Initially, they'll think you're a little crazy. That's okay. It's part of the fun. But eventually, their heart will melt, and so will yours. I was conducting a circle once for a cancer group years ago. And one of the people in the group said that their spouse and they had separated apart from each other over the years. And this person was really troubled by this. This person just really wanted to feel connected to their spouse again. And so I gave this person that practice and said, one white flower every day. Place it in front of your spouse. No words, no explanations, no expectations, no nothing. I just surrendered my driver's license yesterday. How am I going to get a flower? I can't drive to the florist. Draw one. Draw one. Draw one on a piece of paper. No words, just draw a flower and present it every day. My spouse will think I'm crazy. It doesn't matter. No explanations, must be done in silence. A little while later, a few weeks, maybe a month or two later, the person comes back and says, things are different now. Initially, my spouse kept saying, why are you giving these to me? And I just walked away and didn't say anything like you told me to. And then eventually my spouse said, just sit down and have coffee with me. So I did, and I drew another flower. Then we started talking about stuff. And things are so much better. All because of a beautiful little gift and having no expectation of the outcome. And having the humility to offer that gift in silence with no need to explain oneself, no need to justify, no need to say, hey, look how great I am, I'm giving you something. You know, none of these things. Just a sweet offering and an acceptance. In that state of offering, there's lots of fluctuations in the mind going on. This person's going to think I'm crazy. This person's going to think I'm up to something. This isn't going to work. And the practice is to do it anyway. The practice is to do it anyway until the practice of doing it overwrites the doubt, overwrites those fluctuations of the mind which are causing separation and suffering. The practice is to do it anyway. Love anyway. You know? Be present anyway. Be nonviolent anyway. Even if someone comes up to you and pushes you and says, you are violent. I know you are. I can get it out of you. The practice is to be nonviolent anyway. And through doing so, embracing a greater unity and experience the excellent experience of peace. And in that, you experience the cosmic consciousness, just to take it up one more notch of, the esoteric. To me, that's the most exciting part of all of this. Like, I don't know why else I would do this. I mean, I want to be a good person, I want to be a kind person, I want to know myself, but in all honesty, I want to know that. I want to have a relationship with that. And I want all of my experiences to be based in that relationship. Because I see you all as part of that. So my relationship with you is my relationship with that. And by that, God, Goddess, Christ, Buddha, Jesus, Durga, Kali, Krishna, doesn't matter. Someone said to me, well, I call it Christ. Is that going to change things? I said, no, I don't mind. I'll call it Christ too. A name is a name. It's the essence that matters. And then once you get to the place where that relationship is cultivating a greater peace on the inside, then you love all the names. You just love the names. You love the love. You witness the suffering. You honor the suffering. You see it for what it is. And you understand that you can either contribute to it or not. And if we come to a place as an individual and as a community where we really, truly, honestly want that relationship to be cultivated completely, then we will choose to not contribute to the suffering. And then this world will be a different place. Walls will come down, cages will be unlocked, families will be reunited, people will be housed and clothed and receive medical care, education will be free, people will thrive. Birth will be a celebration. Death will also be a celebration. Life will be a celebration. People's choices and the freedom to choose will also be celebrated. because we will understand that I cannot choose for you. It's not possible. I can only support you by not judging you and making your decision more challenging, making your decision harder, making your decision more fraught with guilt. I can step out of your way and have some humility that I do not know what's best for you. I only know that if I don't contribute suffering to your experience, then you won't suffer because of me. Questions or comments? Yes.
This is like off topic, not that if you see like someone blatantly harming somebody else, like what's your role in intervention without like causing more harm to everybody involved? Like you still need to, I don't know, defend the person being harmed.
So, in our first yoga school in Lakehurst, New Jersey, it was after class, everybody had left, and the front of the building was all windows, kind of like that, but all windows. And so you could very easily see into the space. And I was talking with a woman, and this woman walked past, and then she walked past again. And then she stood out there and she looked inside, and she came in. She came in very boldly, very brazenly. And she walked up to the woman I was speaking with, and she got right in her face. And she said, "I've been waiting for this opportunity. I have something to say to you. And I decided I can walk in this space here and I can say it because this is a safe place and I can tell you whatever the hell I want to tell you." She started cursing at the woman and started yelling at her. And I just very easily stepped right in the middle of them. And I said to her, "I am so sad for your suffering, but I need to tell you that you're mistaken. This is a sanctuary, but it is not a sanctuary for violence. It is only a sanctuary for peace. So if you want to continue this, you'll need to do it someplace else. So please leave." No. This is a sanctuary, and I have just as much right to be here as she does. I said, "Yes, you do. You absolutely have as much right to be here as she does. But if you are to stay, then it's got to be peaceful, not harmful. That's the boundary. That's the guideline. If you feel you must harm this person, then you need to go elsewhere." And she was just, and she left. So some people might say, "Well, you hurt her by making her leave." No, I did not. I told her what the guideline was. I told her what the boundary was, and I said, "You need to stay to that boundary." And if she decided that she wasn't going to leave, then I would have continued talking and diffusing as best I could the situation. And had it gone elsewhere, I don't know what I would have done. Whatever the situation called for. So it's not a matter of not getting involved. Certainly, we need to be involved. So, just kind of as a little side, but also supporting that, is to say that, Darwin made some really amazing discoveries in his life that led human beings to believe that they evolved to the highest state of being, that we're above all the other animals and beings. Now, that's not what Darwin intended, but that's the way that it was interpreted, that we started from a single-cell organism in a swamp somewhere, that became a fish, that became an amphibian, and over time, evolution led us to become the highest point on the food chain, right? So this is the way science looks at it a lot of times. Science and research and religion, too, looks at people as here and all other things below. Spirituality doesn't say that. Spirituality says that in order to attain the state of awakening, one must be involved, not evolved. Involution. In order to transcend to that state of wholeness, it's involution. And to be to be involved, you must be involved. Yeah, I can't say it eloquently, but you all know what I'm saying. So by all means, be involved, but be involved for peace. Be involved for compassion. Be involved for the end of violence. Don't be involved for the sake of violence. Mother Teresa, I've just been using this quote over and over lately. Someone asked her one time, aren't you going to the anti-war rally? And she said, no. And they said, why? I would, of all people, thought you would go to the anti-war rally. She said, no, I won't go to the anti-war rally. But when there's a pro-peace rally, I'll be there. So when you see somebody who is behaving harmfully, there are ways to be involved that are peaceful, that diffuse the situation and bring things to a little bit more balance. But it's not easy. Yeah. It's a great question. Sorry the answer is not more straightforward. Other questions or thoughts?
No, but that made me think of, like, I get information from the Southern Poverty Law Center, and they have their 10 ways to fight hate. And it was very much you don't go to those negative rallies, go do something positive instead. Don't even feed into that negative violence.
Absolutely. In my younger days, like in my teenager days and into my 20s and probably even into my 30s, very much protester. But then I thought about it and I was like, this really isn't doing much. You know? And I'm here protesting against something when I could be at home doing something. So I stopped going to protests. I have a lot of respect for protesters, and I have a lot of respect for the process of protesting, but I think that my greatest protest in my life is what I'm doing right now. Because it's pro-peace. It's pro-healing. It's pro-unity. And that's how I want to live my life, is for something, not against everything else.
Advocate, right? Instead
Yeah.
of try to
Exactly. And I think that some of the most powerful protesters of all time were the women in the suffrage movement. Because when they marched on Washington, D.C., they sat down and said not a word. They just sat there and they stopped traffic. I love that. Just like they stopped everything because there were so many of them. Nothing could get done. And they just sat there peacefully without saying a word. Some said a word. Some said a lot of words. But there was a particular group of them that did this silent walk and sit in Washington. Yeah. I wish they would get more attention. And then I wish that we would follow them more. Yeah. And just because someone protests peacefully doesn't mean that violence isn't going to happen. That's not what it means. But it means, but we continue to be peaceful because we understand that peace is the doorway, not the hate, not the violence. And what other people do, we can't really control. But we can control how we live our life. We can control what we stand up for and what we sit down for, and what we turn away from and what we turn toward. And that's probably the greatest use of our energy, is to stand, to sit, to kneel, for what rings true to us. Any other thoughts or questions? No. Good to see you today. Yes, Dr. Jeff.
I'm admiring the example you gave of interrupting the woman's anger and your other compatriot. I appreciate it. At the same time, I'd like to contribute, hopefully, that when we make, that requires you making an assessment, an evaluation of potential danger / harm. And I like to point out that when we go to that place, we're on a very slippery slope.
Yeah.
And that when we are interrupting inappropriate use of physical force, that's one condition. When we're making an assessment of someone else's words or energy being harmful to another, that's an entirely different assessment.
Mm-hmm.
So while I learned from a great example you just gave of potentiality, I'll point out that had the person you were speaking with, not the angry woman, the other woman, was Swami G, or even a devotee well practiced, you may not have had the same assessment of need and may not have felt as compelled.
Absolutely.
And words and energetics are tremendous triggers. But in actuality, the harm is what we're doing to ourselves, and that's the learning ground. And that's a universally truthful place to be.
Mm-hmm.
We're on more consistent ground with that approach.
Absolutely. This morning in the hip opener class, we talked about leaving it alone and letting it resolve. Remember those in class this morning? We said sometimes if you just leave it be, it will work itself out. And there is a great possibility that I could have stepped back and allowed it to resolve itself. But I made the judgment. And I'm sure some part was ego, some part was a response to what I was seeing, some part was a reaction to what I was seeing. I'd like to think that in that moment that I was responding from a place of what I felt was the greatest compassion for everyone involved, not just the person who I knew, but also the person who I didn't, who was visibly shaken and truly. But it's also possible that perhaps my interjecting there caused another situation later. You know, we don't know these things. And part of the nonviolence is taking that into consideration to some degree. You know, I mean, you're not going to stop every time you have a situation, but you will practice, and over time, the practice of how you interact with people, whether you are originating the action or interjecting into a situation, your approach will become solidified based on your practice. So if I was a reactive person, always reacting, then what I had to contribute to that situation would have been highly reactive, potentially, rather than diffusing. And it only diffused in that moment, because karma goes on. Their karma goes on, my karma goes on. So I hear what you're saying, Jeff, and I think absolutely you're completely correct. You know, there's a lot to consider there.
And I'm applauding what you did and what you shared. And I love examples that give me the words I can use if I'm present enough in the moment. Because clearly, just the way you shared it with us, yes, you were in that space of clarity about this is what this space is that you just entered, ma'am, but with full respect for everyone involved. Her, you, the space.
Oh, sure.
Person. So, applauding.
Well, thank you.
And the other reason that I felt compelled to share was that those of us, when we are being sensitive and caring, the parts of us that are hurting and in need are very quick to want to protect others. And perhaps this will lessen the burden that can come with that. Like everybody's in danger or no.
Yeah, absolutely.
There are victims of physical force.
Sure, of course there are.
And the rest of us are all victims of our own learning, if you want to call it that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Somebody else, Courtney, did you have your, no? Did somebody else want to say or contribute?
I just have one question.
Sure.
Liz's question was, she was out, I mean, I don't even know what situation she was in, but you're outside of a sanctified area or sanctuary type area. How do you approach it then? I mean, if there's violence and you feel the need to step in because...
Yeah. So, there's so many diverse situations that can arise. So to have one answer to that is impossible. You have to take it on a case-by-case basis. Some things are none of your business. I mean, really, I hate to say it that way, but some things are none of your business. Two people are arguing over a parking spot. That's none of your business.
No, I get that. Hurting an animal.
Well, yeah, okay. So an animal is in a car on a 90-degree day, and the window's up. You have a remedy. You call the animal control. That's your remedy. You have another remedy. You help the animal out of the car. But here's the consequence to that remedy. You don't know the animal, right? And you don't know, if the animal is aggressive or afraid. So you're taking some chances by letting the animal out of the vehicle. But you can certainly be there, make the phone call, get the appropriate help for people who know what they're doing. And if the owner comes, if the owner, the human person, whatever, comes while you're waiting for the remedy, then, you have other remedies. You take down the license plate number, talk with them. Be like, I was just worried about your animal, that's in the car because, do you recognize how hot it is here? And so then they get testy with you. You just have to take it a little step at a time and see where there's room for conversation and where there's not. And there's nothing more useless than talking with someone who doesn't want to hear you. Really. Okay, I learned that as a parent.
Well, I think in parenting, but I don't know if they were thinking, like, when do you step in to defend your child? That's where I was kind of going with it. In the parenting, so father doesn't maybe, there's something going on there, and there's that whole thing of where you're supposed to step back and let them parent, and you want to defend.
Well, in that instance, we need to take into consideration, again, I don't have the answer for that, but what I do have is a consideration. Thinking that if the parent is always defending the child will never learn how to defend themselves. If the parent is always stepping in to defend the child, then the child will never know when defense is not needed. If the parent is always defending the child, then the child will have low self-esteem. The child will not be able to be a decision maker. The child will become codependent and look at somebody else for their own welfare and well-being. So for the parent to constantly interject in the child's situation and protect the child from potential harm, in my opinion, is harmful. That's just my opinion, though. When it comes to their friendships, they will resolve themselves. The parent's duty, and again, this is my opinion, this is also somewhat based in some of what I've learned over the years from different scriptures and whatnot, and from different teachers that I've, the parent teaches the child kindness. The child's community reinforces that, or not. And that's where the child's personality and interaction skills come into play. So the role of the parent is to be a steward. The role of the parent is to teach the child ethics. Not cold, hard ethics, but compassion. the importance of kindness, the importance of peace, the importance of love, the importance of acceptance, the importance of consequence. That's the role of the parent. And then to allow the child to become who the child is going to be without saying to the child, you're a failure if you don't do it this way. Or those people shouldn't be picking on you. I'll take care of this. Okay, Mom. Mom will do it. Yeah. Mom will take care of it. Now I don't have to do it. But the child does have to do it because the child is going to be walking through the world, and the child needs to be able to, on some level, healthfully develop their own relationship to peace, their own relationship to compassion, their own relationship to sacredness, their own relationship to that. And if you are always the one interjecting in their relationships, then how will they ever know how to do that? So I like that in some countries there's this mindset of the parent being a steward. When Swamiji met my son, he was holding a yoga class and a satsang at the yoga studio in Lakehurst. And he didn't know Jay was my son. Jay came in a couple minutes late. Everybody was already kind of in the midst of it. He went over to the one side, put him out for himself. By the way, he had not practiced yoga, but maybe twice before that. So Swamiji saw that he came in late and called him up to the front and had him put his mat right out there and had him do some of the hardest postures. And Ed and I are just sitting there going, oh, man. And Jay did great. He did phenomenally. He was in dancer pose and this and that. He was all kind of proud of himself, too. Peacock feathers coming out and all, At the end of it, I couldn't help but be a proud mom, right? Because that was my son, who I totally thought was going to fall down and didn't. So Swamiji comes over after all is said and done, and I said to him, or Ed said to him, one of us said, Swamiji, I don't think you know, but that was our son. And Swamiji looked at us and he said, your son? I thought he was my son. And we said, okay. He's not our property. He doesn't belong to us. He's not mine. What does he belong to? That. And I'm only here to not be a hindrance to that relationship. And maybe to be a support to it. So I know that doesn't help with what to do with the school bully. Your kid gets bullied, you stand up for your kid, and you see to it that whatever boundaries are in place are healthy boundaries. And you don't say I'm not going to say you don't, but to tell your child to hit somebody is to meet violence with violence. And we've already discussed and have some agreement that violence will never end violence. So teaching your child how to be a bully will not stop bullying. It will only increase bullying. Yeah, Courtney?
So my oldest had that experience in kindergarten. She was bullied for an entire year, and she turned the behavior that she internalized from that onto my youngest.
Mm-hmm.
Because she reflected it back. How do you deal with that?
That's hard, I know. And again, I always preface this with, I don't have the answer. But what I can say is the way that we are addressing bullying is not working. So maybe don't go to the norm of what people are doing across the board that's not working. And instead, I kind of wonder what would happen. My grandson was being bullied when they first came here. They moved here not too long ago. He started a new school. He's the new kid on the block. There was a kid in school who was bullying him. He came to me. He confided in me. And I kind of said to him, well, typically when somebody bullies another person, it's because they're being bullied. So maybe next time he bullies you, ask him what he gets out of it. Ask him, say, why do you do this? Do you get something from it? Is it supporting you somehow? Come to find out, the boy is being bullied. And that my grandson asking that question in whatever way he asked it supported the boy in somehow expressing what was going on in his own life. So now we're getting to the root. Getting to the root is always important. We can't put a Band-Aid over the thing. That's not going to do anything, We have to get to the root of why the bullying is happening. And I would even suggest that from time to time, it's not a bad idea to actually take the bully and show them immense amounts of kindness, immense amounts of integration. There's a tribe in Africa, they do this. Somebody does something that's like wrong, harmful to another person, they gather in a circle. They put that person in the middle of the circle and they start yelling at them. They start screaming at the top of their lungs. Don't you know you are goodness? Don't you know? Don't you remember when you helped so-and-so last year? Don't you remember when you showed up and did this so valiant and effortless to be there for another? Don't you remember your own heart? Don't you remember who you are? And that's the way they deal with it. They don't say, you're bad, you're bad, you're bad, you're bad. Punish them. After school detention, They don't label them. They say, you have forgotten your heart. Does it always work? Probably not. Absolutely not. But is it an alternate? Violence will never end violence. Only the opposite of violence will eventually end violence. So putting them in the center of that circle of love, we can say, like hard love, kind of straightforward and, straightforward love. The love of remembrance. It's not easy. But it seems like it might be a little bit of a better. And we're not talking about coddling either. And when I look out at the world, I see we mistake things so often. We think that holding boundaries is not healthy and coddling people's poor behavior is. We don't want to coddle poor behavior, That's happening a lot. That's why so many parents are afraid of their children, because they coddle poor behavior. No, that child has forgotten themselves. And that child has not learned respect, has not learned honor, has not learned humility. These are some of the most important ethics. You don't want to beat them over the head with it. But, if they can't honor their parent, how on earth do you expect them to honor anybody else? If they can't have humility to talk to their parent without cursing at them, how on earth do we expect them to walk through the world? It's just, Yeah, Aslan.
And when children can honor their parents, I feel like it's a learned behavior.
It could be. Absolutely.
Because I don't think children innately want to rebel the figure that has been providing for them their whole life.
I agree with you.
I think that innately we want to cherish our parents.
I agree with you for much, but there are situations, and it does come down to some degree of what is permitted into a child's influential life. Violent video games, these types of things, which have an impact on a child's psychology. It just absolutely does. A child is playing a video game where they're killing people, they're going to lack empathy on some level, because they will have killed something over and over and over and over and over again, So yeah, there's absolute parental responsibility there. There's also societal responsibility, though. So we can't forget that. We can't forget that it's not just one. We have to go to the root of it, and the root of this issue with our children nowadays is violence. It is the amount of violence that they are engaging in on a day-to-day level. It's also the lack of empathy. You know, in school, some teacher was fired. I couldn't believe when I read this. This teacher was fired because a student asked her if the student would receive 50% of their grade. They didn't hand anything in. So she said no. And she refused to the administration. She said, I'm not going to give the child a 50 when the child has not given me anything. They fired her. That's coddling bad behavior. That's getting closer to the root. Why are we coddling that kind of behavior? And then we have these children, these amazing, amazing children stand up and say, I don't want to be shot when I go to school. We need gun reform. And what do they receive? They're called names. They're blasted over certain media channels as being insane, as being paid advertising. You know, I mean, where are our societal values in this? That we give the child who didn't even bother putting their name on a piece of paper a grade of 50, and the child who is afraid for their life, we label them as crazy. So that gets closer to the root, right, Az? So now we have to say, how do we interact with that? How do we begin to change it so that the child who didn't bother handing anything in understands there's a consequence? And so the child who is afraid of being shot because they saw 27 of their friends in school killed in front of them, they can have some peace in their life. That's us. That's us. That's on us as a community, as a state, as a nation, and as a world. So it's not so straightforward. But it's got to come away from violence. Violence is not going to fix what's wrong with this world. What's wrong with this world is a real deep state of ignorance. Very deep state of ignorance. Incorrect knowledge. You know, people coming at these types of issues. I know I'm on a soapbox now, so thank you. People coming at these issues like gun control from a personal opinion place. It's not about personal opinion, it's about life. It's about sanctity of life. I'm sorry, this is a real soapbox issue. Don't tell me that you are pro-life and anti-abortion, and at the same point in time you think it's okay for people to have guns in a school? I mean, you want to talk about missing the mark there. That's just beyond idiocy. If you are pro-life, then you are pro across the board peace. Pro-life is pro-peace. And pro-peace means that there are some things that are none of your business, and there are some things that are very much your business. But there is nothing that you are entitled to that will harm another person. There is nothing you are entitled to do that would harm another person. If you're pro-life, you're pro-peace. And that does not mean, just to be clear, that you're anti-abortion. In the wonderful words of Mother Teresa, I do not wish to be anti-anything. I wish to be for something. Yeah, I'll stop there because I could go on forever. And you've all been so patient with me today, so I thank you. I thank you. I do typically try to keep my personal opinions out of it, but I think in this day and age, you know, it's a valuable conversation to have about getting to the root. So thank you, Aslan, for bringing that up. Thank you to everybody who had something to say or something to ask, for contributing to the conversation, you know, for being open to the dialogue. So let's sit nice and tall and close the eyes. And just take a moment to allow yourself to feel your own presence. And to feel the presence of all these amazing souls that are sharing the space with you right now. And to feel the essence of that as it moves around us, within us, and throughout us, in spite of us, and also because of us. And drawing the hands together in front of the heart, and with an intention of peace in this world, peace in our hearts, and peace in our minds. Let's lift our voices in one beautiful Om. And bowing the head toward the heart, acknowledging all that is. And draw the face to center. Namaste. Thank you all so much for being here today, for sitting and listening and considering, and for being who you are, for walking through this world with the light that you have to shine upon yourself and all others that you come into contact with. And just be the peace. That's all we have to do. Thank you. And Heather, I just want to say